blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
What an abrupt ending. Hello, R users. Thanks for putting up with me and my. I had students who. I had one student in particular who was exposed to that music all day, every day, and she just called it weird music. But thanks for putting up with my weird music. My name's John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology. I'm an 11-year, roughly, user of R for normal, boring statistical applications. But for the majority of those 11 years now, I've been kind of just, what's the word for it, I guess? Just surrounding myself with these what are called literate programming principles and practices. So been using R not only to do normal quantitative analyses and data visualizations, but also to author the larger project. So to summarize those results and doing it all in one platform. So every week I hang out here on Tuesdays at 7 o'clock Eastern. And the music, before we get into it, the music made me think actually. So we're getting close, and it blows my mind that it's probably small peanuts on the grand YouTube kind of space here, but it blows my mind that we're almost at 100 people who are joined on this channel. That's primarily just talking about using R to write papers and make presentations and things like that. But these little ramps that I use to kind of get ready, and I tell people on Twitter that we're live, and I put I put a link to the slides in the chat. So it's useful. It helps me kind of gives people time to come in if they want it. There's a little buffer there for awareness that this thing's going on. But anyway, so I've been posting those songs as well. So as we get closer to 100 people, the neurotic Woody Allen side of me is saying, you know, they don't really like R for authoring purposes. It's other people who like your weird music. So if you're close to 100 and you just like my weird music, you're welcome as well. So we we take all kinds here. So thank you for popping by. But we're here every Tuesday. When I say we, I'm occasionally joined by some compatriots who are working on projects, who I'm collaborating on projects with, that fully execute that project using R. And again, I'm using quotes there because it's funny. I'm reading. I don't think I have it right here, but I'm reading for the third time now a book called The Tech Book. Let me see. I should probably put that in the comments here. The Tech Book. It's written by Donald Knuth, and Knuth was the developer of the tech system, which most people now know as LaTeX. LaTeX has a bunch of macros that make tech a little more accessible, but he has a book called the Tech Book, and the Tech Book, here it is. Um, yeah, here's a PDF of it. It's fascinating. It's it's nerdly fascinating, I guess. It talks about typesetting and creating a language that's focused on typesetting. Now, Knuth, his main interest was in beautiful representations of mathematical formulas, but some of the stuff that he created turned into this. There was another kind of movement that was parallel to Knuth. But anyway, man, am I going off on tangents tonight? So I was reading Knuth, and one of the things that Knuth says early on in his textbook is it's a very fun. He writes in a very funny manner, but he says, keep in mind that the author occasionally lies, but those lies serve a good purpose. And so when I say using R to author, it's kind of lying, but lying with a good purpose. We're using Markdown, or we're using LaTeX, or we're using eight straight HTML. Um, but we're authoring it, we're executing it within a platform that also facilitates the performing of normal statistical analyses. So we're using RStudio. So we use RStudio for that. And so when I say using R to author, technically it's a lie, but it's a lie along the same lines of Knuth's lies, and I think therefore it's acceptable. We hang out every Tuesday. Sorry, this is a very long intro. Um, we hang out every Tuesday, and we use this metaphor of an academic office hour. All of us that do show up, we have the same academic training, so we're all industrial and organizational psychologists, and we met in a university setting. So office hours, we're all familiar with those. And we're just here. If there's anyone that wants a interactive Q&A back and forth to talk to someone who's been doing this for a long time and has a lot of experience, not necessarily expertise, but a lot of experience using these products, we're here for that. And so in the absence of what I would love to do is just kind of work with people on their projects and get them over the hump when they encounter obstacles. But in the absence of that, we've been just fo- focusing on a feature. I almost sounded like the Jolly Green Giant there, right? Fee fi fo fum. I think I almost said fee fi fo fum.
What?
Yeah, fee fi fo fum. But so the feature that we're focusing on tonight is using hyperlinks. So using hyperlinks within your documents. Now, we occasionally come up with a feature that challenges us. This one shouldn't be too challenging because hyperlink incorporation is something that we do all the time. To be meta, everyone loves meta. So to be meta, there are hyperlinks to several components of these slides if you access the slides. And I do recommend you access the slides if you're watching this. I have a lot of fun putting these together, and um, I think I've become a little better at constructing them, even if I've become less creative in terms of the content of them. So hopefully there's some resources there that are helpful to people, and so that's my main goal when I put them together. Is one, I like it to look kind of nice, just artistically, but the second goal, which should probably be the primary goal, but the second goal is to have resources there that are helpful to people that might be interested in the topic. So it's always in the slides. So please check out the slides. So tonight we're going to check out hyperlinks, but before we do that, we always do a recap of what happened the previous week, and we do this for a real straightforward reason. The structure of these weekly sessions is intended to be open-ended, exploratory, not scripted. And so because of that, we'll always do a recap the next week. And so if you are interested in a topic and you stumble across these weekly sessions, keep in mind that the following week is probably a better presentation of the previous week's topic. Boy, couldn't be more confusing, right? I might have to do something to amend that eventually, but for the foreseeable future, we'll be keeping this structure. All right, so let's get our transition into what the heck happened last week.
Well, the problem of the nation's disappearing TV may be solved after all, for Senator Shunpike has just appointed our hero, Rocky, to be in charge of the investigation.
Hooray! Thank you, and I'll do my best to track down the culprit.
It looked as if it might be a short track, though, for at that moment an iron lamppost trembled, tilted, and toppled over right at Rocky. Fortunately for our hero, Senator Shunpike chose that same moment to begin his farewell address.
And now, friends, I must bid you adieu as...
Boy, when he says adieu, he really does.
Congratulations, Senator. Best speech you ever made.
As the senator was whisked away on a stretcher, Rocky and Bullwinkle examined the fallen lamppost.
No doubt about it, Bullwinkle. This post was bitten clear through.
True.
But who could have done it?
You know, politicians and professors share some kind of characteristics, I guess, in terms of best speech ever given. It's just cut way short, and it was probably the best lectures I've ever given, or you know, when I'm not overly verbose. So again, there are hyperlinks on here. Last week we looked at GitHub, and GitHub is an online sharing document site that we use in our workflows, and it really helps with collaboration. So it's a very useful resource to, even for, we're not developers, we are primarily psychologists. I also occasionally work with people from other disciplines, primarily psychologists. So our projects oftentimes are just papers, and it's a phenomenal way to share work on these collaborative projects when they are papers. That I hate seeing this so much, and I used to see this well, way back in the day. I'd see this from students learned over the course of the last 11 years with me to not do this, but collaborators often from different disciplines, when they would share documents with me that we were working on, they would invariably look like this. So they would be, you know, the name of the paper, and then toward the end of the file name, it would be the current date. And you would just have a proliferation of these things. And it just drove me nuts. And it drives me nuts. Knowing that you don't need to do this, that there's a very easy workable solution. Don't do this. And so one of the easy solutions is to utilize a resource that's available for free for people like us, which is GitHub. And so you can actually host things like papers and files and things that are important for a project up on GitHub. Now, last week what we did was we walked through a skill module, and most of that skill module, I think all of the skill module, was just working with the online repository within GitHub itself. When you're using GitHub as a data scientist or as a researcher who's interested in using quantitative analyses within your project, you're mostly going to be interacting with GitHub not online, but on your local computer through RStudio. And so this integrates well. There's a hyperlink there to a resource that I put together a few years ago with some student colleagues. Casey is someone that comes on this channel every once in a while. Again, there's 43 slides on this. This slide format is the old one that we used to prefer before we started using this one. What you're looking at now is facilitated via Quarto, and we have plenty of resources on this channel for how to use Quarto. There's a get started, how and why to get started on this channel. It's a snipped clip, so go ahead and look for that. I'll start probably keeping that. I should start keeping that URL available so I can just paste that, but it's on this channel. If you can't find it and you're interested in it, let me know. But so GitHub through RStudio, if you're interested in setting it up, go ahead and access that hyperlink and follow the slides. You only need to follow the slides through number 21 or 22. The back end of that slide deck is all kind of more intermediate to advanced level stuff. You don't need it to just get started. But this version control, there's underlying software that GitHub relies on. It's called Git, and so the Jeringen slide deck, it actually walks you through how to install Git on your machine locally as well. But if you use this workflow, you're not going to ever have to deal with this kind of nonsense ever again. Now, I found instead of structuring this in terms of an outline of what we learned last week, what I did was I actually found a cheat sheet, and if you click that, there's a hyperlink on that as well. These are images. Even this is an image. You see there's all kinds of functionality on this cheat sheet that you're not going to have access to unless you download it. So go ahead and, if you're interested in that, go ahead and download it. You can see I already did so there's a number 2 after the name there. But once you download it, it'll come as a PDF, and then all of these hyperlinks will be available, and you can, we're speaking about hyperlinks today, but you can access these hyperlinks, and we'll talk today about how you use these hyperlinks, how you specify them. Now, one of the reasons that I used this as last week's recap was because I loved their workflow here. The first thing that they have on their cheat sheet is pretty much a recap of what and why we went through what we went through last week. Now this PDF's acting a little funny. It's not letting me isolate sequential lines here. I'm not sure why that is. It might have something to do with the way in which the person developed this cheat sheet. But in the upper left-hand corner, the first thing you see are, and again, these are best practices that someone has culled together over the years of, I'm guessing, I don't know this person. It's Jacob Scott. But this person's recommended workflow based on experience and maybe some other resources as well. This is very much consistent with what I've evolved into as well in terms of my workflow, working with RStudio and using R as a quantitative processor, but also executing full projects from within that environment. So not going to Google Docs, not going to Microsoft Word, not going to PowerPoint, do it all within RStudio. And so they're using the same components. They're using RStudio as their IDE. That's this right here. I have mine, the way I have mine set up is I actually have, if we look at my appearance here, I like this Monokai kind of theme. It's just, I've gotten used to it over the years. There's color coding that I'm familiar with, and I know what to look for, and it's just, I know when you're familiar with R or RStudio and you see someone else share their screen, and you're used to a white screen, this can look quite a bit different. But so we use RStudio as well, and then the software that we're primarily using to facilitate the production of things like documents and papers and PowerPoints, it's called Quarto, and Quarto needs to be installed on your local machine as well. But I also love the framing of Quarto. So the framing of Quarto is here to facilitate literate programming, and literate programming means different things to different people. As originally specified, this was a way to write code that also had documentation within it. The way I'm currently using literate programming is this is using R to author. So within the same platform that you're doing your quantitative analysis, we can also write our summaries. We can use citations. We can do visuals. We can add hyperlinks. You can do everything you need to do that you normally would do in a word processor within your scripting environment. And so that's That's what I mean by literate programming, and that's what Quarto facilitates, and that's what every week we're here promoting is literate programming. There's all kinds of different synonyms for this. Reproducible research is kind of a global encompassing umbrella term that's sometimes used here. Literate programming, I don't hear any psychologists talk about that. I, however, do use that phrase. I've kind of evolved toward using the phrase single platform project execution because I think that's a little more descriptive, but it's the same. It means the same thing as literate programming means to me as a psychologist. So we use Quarto for literate programming. And then the Git part, we didn't talk necessarily about Git, but that's a piece of software that goes on your machine. And then one of the things Git does is it obviates or just blows out of the water the need or even kind of the possibility of getting a proliferation of the same type of documents, but with just slightly different naming conventions. So Git helps with that. And then GitHub is kind of a facilitator of the Git software. And so GitHub provides us this online sharing cloud type of environment where we can keep stuff, and we can also do some project management on GitHub, so we can do things like work on different developmental branches and ask for review, ask for changes to be incorporated into the main project itself. So GitHub's great, and so I think there's a growing community of social and behavioral scientists who have started to move toward this kind of workflow. I've been doing it for, gosh, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years. This is how I structure my work as well, and GitHub is a major, massive part of that. And so I just loved this cheat sheet because the software piece of it was very consistent with not only how I prefer to work, but also the orientation and philosophy of these weekly sessions. Like, this is a great way to structure your work if you want to try to execute your projects within your what most people consider to be analytical platform. Now, I think I've mentioned this on this channel before, but in the back recesses of my mind, I have this kind of fantasy that as a psychologist teaching R, I always had great students who took to it and liked it, but there was also a big chunk of resistance and I don't know. I want to be kind here, but there was a lot of resistance to it as well. And what I'm curious about and what I fantasize occasionally about is I wonder if we collectively as a field were to present R not as this is how you need to do a t-test, or this is how you do a correlation, or this is how you do a bar graph or a histogram, but if we said this is what you're going to write your project in, this is what you're going to generate your paper in, if there would be less resistance to accepting it. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've tried to do that with undergrads as well, and predictably that doesn't go over well. But at the graduate level, I wonder if that might be met with a little less resistance, a little more excitement. Because to me, one of the first kind of aha moments that I had with all of this literate programming, single project execution stuff was when a student of mine, Yang, showed me Papaja. And Papaja is the package that facilitates the creation of APA formatted papers. And I was like, what? You're telling me that I can get a correlation table and I don't have to mess with it? It just spits it out? You're telling me it does the abstract, it does the running head, it does all of this crazy formatting stuff that the American Psychological Association says this is what your paper needs to look like, not in terms of content, but in terms of structure. It does it for you? What? Really? So, yeah, there's some projection there, so I'm assuming that other people would have that same reaction. I know undergrads don't because I've tested it with them, but graduate students maybe. So in the future, if we're not if 3i Atlas is not some piece of technology from some interstellar world that's gonna take, it's coming at the right time, because either AI is gonna take over the world and kill us all, or 3i Atlas is gonna make us stop around the other side of the sun and then launch an invasion on us here. Maybe AI can battle the aliens. um, but anyway, if that doesn't happen, my hope is that in 4 or 5 years, that kind of the way in which R is presented, and I'm focusing on R because that's kind of the more popular right now analytical platform for psychologists. And when I say more, I'm comparing it to Python, which is the other kind of big one that psychologists tend to use. But I would hope in 4 to 5 years that maybe we collectively as a discipline that's trying to encourage people to use these tools, if we were to frame it as this is your entire project, not just the t-test, but you do your whole paper here, maybe there would be greater acceptance. Anyway, that's my part that I'm doing here to try to get our fields to be a little more consistent with this reproducible research standard that people, they like to use those words. I'm not sure that they always operate in ways that are consistent with those words, and this is just such an easy way to do it. So hopefully in 5 years we'll have more people doing it. If you're watching this, thank you, because you're either doing it or you're considering it, and so that's admirable. Really, it is. So today we're going to talk about hyperlinks, and so 26 minutes in, I'm so sorry. If you do happen to stumble across this and it's not live, just put it on 2x speed. I don't know if 2x is available. I know that you can up the speed. People talk about that all the time on podcasts that I watch. I don't tend to do that, but I think it makes people like me more tolerable, I think. So there are hyperlinks hidden throughout here. I don't remember. These are linked, by the way, so if anyone is familiar with The Legend of Zelda, that was one of my first, okay, I'm going to stop going off on tangents, right? Let's stay on task here. So I'll try to stay on task. So there's actually just kind of an introductory of what's a hyperlink link here. And because these, it is one of those terms that probably doesn't need much definition, but I am a psychologist, and so definitions are important to us. And so there are some, there's a little bit of history here that talks not only about hyperlinks, but some of the foundational elements that a hyperlink is based on or dependent on. And here they talk about 3 different pillars. There are differences between internal and external links. There's an incoming link. There are anchors. We'll talk a little bit about anchors tonight. So there's more complexity and depth here than you might think. I'm projecting. Than I would have thought. So to me, even someone who's read the tech book by Donald Knuth, and it talks about things like kerning and ligatures and control sequences and like an FI together. An FI should be treated as one character, not 2, because of the way that it tends to be printed on a page. Even someone that's into that level of detail on things like typesetting, I wasn't familiar with this level of depth of kind of thought and just kind of the amount of information and variety and complexity there is with just something like a hyperlink. So go ahead and take a look at that resource if you're interested. We're going to split this up in terms of 2 different types of hyperlinks. Fundamentally, there are hyperlinks that you can have within your document or product that link to other sections. Often those are just referred to as cross-references, and cross-references in Quarto are going to be facilitated by this curly bracket. Not always, but it can be facilitated by this curly bracket specification. And so you can also cross-reference to a code chunk or to output, and sometimes that's done within code chunks. But as we're writing, we're going to see that this curly bracket convention is pretty slick, because later in the document, if you want to reference this, instead of the # fig elephant, you just reference it with an @ sign # elephant. Pound elephant? No, fig elephant. I'm sorry. I swear I'm just drinking water. Like I know those of you. That's Catwoman, by the way. So as I kind of forgot what I was drinking from here. I don't know if that. Again, that's one of those kind of inappropriate cartoons. So sorry if that offends anyone, but it's a cartoon for crying out loud. She's just kind of like sexy. She's a little sexy Catwoman. I don't remember where I got those. Anyway, so I said I wasn't going to go off on tangents, and look at me now. Look at me now. So I think we'll start actually with some external references because these are what people primarily think about when they think about hyperlinks. It's linking to something else on the internet typically. Now there are some amendments that have been, I think, fairly recent in terms of capabilities on these hyperlinks, and so we'll go over those and see some of the options that we actually have. What I would like to find, I thought I must have changed it. I thought I actually had a link to a very basic kind of hyperlink presentation. Maybe it's on this one. There it is. So let's actually let's see what hyperlinks look like using the standard specification that is shared not only with R or Quarto or R Markdown, but this is a convention that seems to be shared across different Markdown flavors. So we talked over the course of the last couple of weeks about different dialects of Markdown. I'm going to get out of the live stream slide deck and we will just open. I don't need a project for this. I don't think we're going to do anything that requires a project. So I'm just going to open up a Quarto document. We'll start with an HTML file, that's fine. And we'll play with different formats and see what these hyperlinks look like. Now, it already gave us a hyperlink here. We'll pretend like that didn't happen. Although we got to follow my standard convention. My standard convention is to always just make sure that the default document renders on your local machine, just because, you know, this is a little different than pulling up Microsoft Word. There are some dependencies that we have here. We talked about Casey. Casey, sorry, I'm going to write over you. Casey already exists. I know he exists. Casey's awesome. But we are going to write over Casey. And it works. And there you see already the hyperlink. So one way to structure these hyperlinks is to represent the full URL, and that's just done through angled brackets. Now you can hyperlink to anything you want. Let's hyperlink to the textbook. So I put that in the chat earlier, or the comments. I still don't know what the proper terminology is. But this URL will take you to a free online PDF version of Donald Knuth's textbook. And I think it's the more recent version of it. Now, one of the things you can see here, just straight off the bat, is you may not want to fully represent, you may not want to represent the entire URL if it's long, unwieldy, or if if it's verbose, right? If there's a lot of language there. But the functionality is there. If I click that, it's going to take me to the textbook. Look at that. It took me to, why did it take me to page 32? Did my URL specify a page? It didn't. That's weird. I wonder if maybe that's where I stopped on this computer. Chapter 5 looks about right. But this is the textbook. And let's see if we can find his statement about lying, just because I think it's important. Well, you can look for that if you want. So that's one way to execute a hyperlink. If we look at another option here, another option is to use square brackets and parentheses instead of angled brackets. So angled brackets are going to represent or duplicate what's in the angled brackets, but it will facilitate an actual navigation to that site as well. The angle bracket and parenthesis convention, this is the structure that seems to be shared across almost every dialect of Markdown. And so this is fairly universal. And so this is how I usually do hyperlinks. So within square brackets, I'll put the information that I want to be displayed within the rendered document. And then the hyperlink URL itself just goes adjacent to it within regular parentheses. So let's go ahead and underneath we'll leave that long URL in there, but then we'll also say you can also check the book out here. And so in order to specify where I want the URL, I can just I hit too many keys, sorry. In the RStudio editor, I like writing within RStudio because it facilitates things like parentheses and square brackets and angle brackets and quotes and double quotes. So if I wanted to double quote around this, I can highlight it and just hit the double quote button, and it puts them at the beginning and the end. Whereas if you're in Word or other word processors, what it would do is it would just replace the highlighted part. Now this is something that is probably more functionally useful for writing actual code. So for writing actual code bits, this 1+1, oftentimes in order to specify, for example, nesting or order of operation, we'll want to put parentheses around there. So that's the way in which I'm guessing that's the manner in which that functionality was first intended, but it's also very helpful for text. And so I just put a starting square bracket there and it shows up. And then in adjacent parentheses, I'm going to put this URL. And again, the primary advantage, I suppose, of this structure for hyperlinks is that instead of this very long URL being displayed and taking up line space, what we're going to have is we're just going to have the word here displayed, and the here will have a hyperlink associated with it. So let's re-render that and take a look. And the functionality is the same. You can, if this were open in a browser, you can see the actual URL upon hover. It shows up in the lower left-hand, usually lower left-hand corner of your browser. And so that's a cheat that you can use. Now the same, it's also showing up on the top URL, but the top URL I can also, I know what it is, I can see what it is. It's hidden here, it's hidden on this one. Okay, so that's hyperlinks. We can also hyperlink to images, so maybe let's do that real quick. So hyperlinking images is something that I do fairly frequently. I'm just looking for a picture now. What should we do a picture of? Bullwinkle? Oh, that's a horrible Bullwinkle. Who did what? Universal Studios, what are you doing? There's a style of animation called Cal Arts, and Cal Art animation should be shot into the sun, I think. It's just, I don't like it. Maybe it's a generational thing, but it kind of sticks out. I love cartoons, I love animation, but this Cal Art stuff, it's despicable, honestly. So I'm gonna look for, I feel bad for Bullwinkle being represented like that. There's a nice looking Bullwinkle. So I'm gonna copy that image address by right-clicking, and the normal way you put in an image is very similarly structured to hyperlinks. It's square brackets, parentheses, but in front of those square brackets you're going to put an exclamation point, and then within the parentheses you're going to put a link to the image that you actually want to display. And in RStudio it'll generally give you a preview of that. Now this isn't the greatest picture of Bullwinkle because it has that kind of haha we fooled you, it's not really a transparent background. And the JPEG image file types, they'll do that, so they won't have transparency with them, but they'll sometimes appear as though they might. That's okay, we'll leave them on there for that for now. What we can do with this image currently, if we hover over this image, there's nothing. If I click on it, there's nothing there to access. Now we did see previously that there is a function within these Quarto files to enable something called Lightbox. And so Lightbox is pretty cool on these images. Now this is clickable. It's not going to be the hyperlink that we want, but it's clickable because it'll pop out that image and give it in a separate window. We had a couple of sessions on Lightbox images. And so that's one way to kind of have interactivity with the image. I'm going to set that back to, well, I'm just going to comment that out. And the way that I usually do hyperlinks on images is to essentially nest. So by nesting, what I mean is I can treat this entire image specification as the inside information on my square brackets, and then adjacent to that, and you can already start to see where this gets a little unwieldy in terms of the text, but inside that I can actually put a URL or a link, and it should give me a hyperlink straight to that. We'll put in the Newsbook again because I'm not very creative. And then let's take a look here. So now I have my hyperlink with the URL. I have my choice of text to display with the hyperlink. And then I have an image, and you can see, I'm getting a little feedback here with my cursor cover or cursor hover. I meant to say cursor hover. And now if I click that, it'll take me to that book as well. And it's taking me to a different page, which I'm not understanding why it's taking me sometimes to different places. So 3 different ways to do hyperlinks. Now, you encounter hyperlinks in all kinds of different document types, but let's take a look at a PDF. PDF and HTML files are the 2 that you typically want to do some testing with to make sure that the renderings have the same functionality, because some of the specifications that you need in terms of your script file need to change slightly in order to be acted upon the same within PDF and HTML files. This is actually looking fine. So the font's different, obviously, in the PDF file. I am getting a different visual cue there upon hover, so it's giving me by default this kind of color specification. And then also you see, like we saw in our previous, now this might be because I'm not in Adobe, I'm actually using Microsoft Edge as my PDF viewer. I don't have Adobe, but 2, I do this intentionally anyway, because when I render PDFs via RStudio and Quarto, it is more forgiving to have Microsoft Edge as your default viewer. It's I have collaborators who sometimes run into issues with having a PDF open when you're trying to generate one and then getting errors. You don't get that error if you're actually using Microsoft Edge as your browser. It'll just open up in a new tab, and so that's helpful. But so the reason I mention that is we're seeing the same preview in the lower left-hand version of my screen here in terms of what the actual URL is. I believe that's probably a function of me viewing this within Microsoft Edge and not any functionality specifically characteristic of PDFs. But the functionality is still there. You can use those links the same. Now Bullwinkle's rendering kind of big, but you see that feedback again. Same feedback that we're getting on these links in terms of that yellowed out. We could override that. Well, that's just the default. And all the functionality is there. It's the same. Looks great. Works great. I think it looks great. PDFs, I guess different tastes are going to have different interpretations of PDFs. There is a alternative way to get a PDF, and that is through using a typist type document within Quarto. And we see this actually looks a little cleaner. I think I like that. Now, by default, within the typist specification, we're not getting the same text visual cues. Within the straight PDF document, by default, we were actually getting a different color specification. I think it was blue. Blue tends to be standard on hyperlinks. But we are getting the same background color specification. And so the functionality is still there as well. I actually kind of like the fonts better in the default typist document than the PDF. But again, that's just kind of personal style preference. I guess the other type of document that we frequently do that we can check are our reveal.js slides. And then and then and then we'll look a little more specifically here at some of the more recent kind of things, tweaks that you can do without having to get under the hood too much in terms of hyperlinks. Okay, so again, I have the hyperlink here, I have the hyperlink here, and I have the hyperlink here on the image. Now on these HTML files, I'm getting less visual cue. Just again, by default, that can be overridden. Maybe that's one of the things we'll take a quick look at here. But I am getting a cursor change from the arrow to the gloved finger point. You know, if we ever change the time of these again, I might have to go earlier. The older I get, the more grandpa-like I become with just like, I don't know, I think I need a nap or something. It's like, it's bedtime for Bonzo here. Like, I start to fumble my words a little bit. Maybe I need something a little more strong in here. I guess I could start. Are there regulations on that? I don't know. There used to be regulations on like whether you could have any mind-altering sorts of substances on either TV or radio. I know TV for sure because I used to love the show Cheers, and one of the things, I don't know if this is urban legend or what, but supposedly Cheers, they couldn't drink real beer. Is it? I think so. It was in a bar, so that's what people do in bars is they drink beer. But I believe that they had to have fake beer. I don't know. Maybe that's just urban legend. Cross references. I don't know that we have time for those. There's a reference. We've done cross references before. I guess we could do a quick one here. So we're just going to use this convention of again expanding from this image specification. The prefixes that you want to use are going to be somewhat important. They can be overridden, but by default, they're going to give you the prefix for the thing that you're referencing within the document itself. And so we'll just go with Bullwinkle here. We'll give him. Now we already have a lot of information here, so this will be interesting. So in terms of a hyperlink, I'm gonna unpack this a little bit so we can see it a little better. And maybe let's do a different image. We'll do Rocket J Squirrel. Did you know out there that his full name was Rocket J? There's the Cal Arts thing again. You people quit messing with these wonderful characters. Like, stay in California, do your own thing. Don't be messing with Rocky and Bullwinkle. You know, Rocky and Bullwinkle, they're from Minnesota too. These California people. You just got to come and mess up. What the heck happened there? Preview looks weird. I thought I got a Rocky picture, but it looks like maybe I accidentally took a... How'd I do that? I did a weird copy and paste, apparently. Let's double check that. The preview pane within RStudio has really been kind of wonky for a year or so, and I think that has to do. We talked about iframes. A few sessions ago, and I think the preview issues actually have to do with iframes. So let me go back and see if I can find another. I must have copied it wrong. I think this is the image we like. I'm going to right click on that, copy image address, and then we're going to put it in here into our hyperlink. It is the same. Okay, so there's something wrong with that URL. Sorry. So we can't use that picture of Rocky. We're definitely not going to use a Cal Arts one. I mean, it looks like he's got, what is it, encephalitis or something there? Looks like Elephant Man Rocky. CalArts people. They ruined Scooby-Doo as well. And some other things that I saw. I don't know. I gotta shelter myself a little bit. I gotta make sure not to expose myself to some of these things, otherwise I get too upset. Of all things to get upset about, right? It's a cartoon. All right, there's Rocket J Squirrel, and we were going to put these curly bracket specifications on it with the pound sign, and then the prefix, we'll call it Fig Rocky, and see what happens there. Again, this is another type of hyperlink, but it's a hyperlink within a document itself. Now it's giving a figure number to Rocky. It's one of the consequences of using this sort of curly bracket specification. We can amend that. We can suppress that if we actually wanted to. But what I wanted to do tonight was not amend it or suppress it, but we'll do some lorem ipsum. Just to have text in between. Then we'll say lorem ipsum at Rocky. And now this is going to be a hyperlink to the image itself, which the image is very close in proximity to the hyperlink, so it's not going to be all that earth-shattering or awe-inspiring. But the neat thing about HTML files within these newer installations of Quarto is they give you a preview of the thing that's being cross-referenced upon hover. And so if I now put my cursor there, you're going to get that image of Rocky actually pop up. Now we can do this. Let's try it with Bullwinkle. Bullwinkle, the structure there is a little more complex because what we did was we did the image specification first, and then we wrapped that image specification with a hyperlink. So if we're following the structure, we should be able to put the curly brackets here after the image specification, but prior to the hyperlinking. Now, this level of stacking, this is some of the stuff that I can understand people getting turned off by when we're talking about literate programming and having a record of everything that you've done so you can go back and undo it if you ever want to do it, or amend it, change it, share it with other people. They get the same thing. I admit this to someone who's interested in putting a figure within something like a Word document. They would probably look at you. There are certain people who would look at you cross-eyed and say, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just open up a Word document, right-click, and then put the image in that you want? So that actually worked fine. And the reason I can tell it worked fine is because now we get a figure 1 on Bullwinkle, and Rocky now has been renumbered to figure 2. One of the beautiful things about literate programming when we're creating papers as a psychologist, someone who used to, I kind of lost my drive for this, but I used to work on a lot of research projects and write them up and summarize them and submit them to journals. And one of the historical kind of just messy, nasty aspects of this process was before the final acceptance of your paper, there's always some sort of back and forth with editors and reviewers, and they want something changed and slightly different. And almost invariably, part of that change has to do with tables and figures. Well, take this figure out. Well, make these two tables into one table. So I remember the first paper, I think the first research project I ever got published, I believe, was my master's thesis. And I remember, the only thing I really remember about that project is struggling with the final version of the paper in terms of within the paper itself, calling out the right table number, and within the end of the document, actually numbering properly the table that I'm referencing and referring to. And it's just a big mess. You don't have to worry about that with cross-references within these literate programming kind of applications. You're going to get an automatic numbering just based on where it appears in the paper. So Rocky is now figure 2. Just to, I guess, prove a point, we'll reference Bullwinkle. And then to prove a point, we'll take Rocky and move him above Bullwinkle. And you can also see now upon hover is going to be a little more useful here because Bullwinkle because Bullwinkle is not easily seen at this point in the document. So again, just to prove a point, quick point, let's go ahead and take Rocky and we'll move him above Bullwinkle. And now Rocky now should be number figure 1. We could also add further descriptions to those figures. And again, as I said, we could even suppress that figure number if we wanted to. We can change the orientation, the alignment, where it is to right justified, left justified. But those are cross references. I guess just quickly, let's take a look at those in some of these different document types as well. Now this is where we start to, with PDFs, this is where you start to maybe run into some issues in terms of slightly different script specification that you need in order to realize the same functionality. But it looks like it's probably okay for us here. We're not going to get this, we shouldn't get the same preview upon hover within this PDF document. PDF documents intentionally are intentionally static, so the interactivity is limited here. What I thought we might not see, but we did see, which is neat, is we actually saw the prefix appear. So we actually are getting figure specified here. And again, we have different types of prefixes that we can use, and so those include table, list, tip, note, warning, and there's a long list. You can also have custom prefixes, so you can make your own prefix as well. But that's pretty neat, I think. What these hyperlinks do in PDFs is they'll take you there. So if you access them upon hover, again, they show that color, and so the color says that there's some interactivity here. But what it does when you access the link itself is it takes you to the thing being referenced. Okay. Typist, I guess we'll just take a look at that quick, make sure that that works. I'm not going to do a revealed.js just because the revealed.js is an HTML product. It will operate the same as an HTML file or page. It's just that the pages are separated into slides. Typist looks great as well. There is now a little difference there. So the hyperlink that we're getting in typist is actually the entire prefix plus the figure, but the functionality is the same. It just takes you to that figure. Okay. And so these cross references I think are even a little more powerful than the external link hyperlinks, because this helps you to navigate your file, the product that you're working on. So if you're doing something like a technical report or a paper, the ability to navigate from within that paper quickly to different points of the paper is, again, it's first world kind of thing, but I think it's neat. When we make our papers, we use these cross references, and so reviewers, people who are looking at the paper, can always just click on a reference to, for example, figure 1 or figure 2, and it'll take them there. So kind of a neat thing. Those internal cross references I think are pretty neat. Now we're kind of running up against the clock again this week, which is good. That means, well, I was blabbing too much. But one of the things I wanted to take a look at were some of these kind of newer, I think, newer kinds of options. Now, one of the things that I've been talking about over the last couple of weeks is that within my slides, I don't have, let me see, I'm going to open this up as a different tab so I can access the slides. Within my slide deck, I don't have a hugely helpful visual cue that a hyperlink actually exists. And so there's a default specification that we could take a look at, and that's just simply putting this box with an arrow next to it next to links. And so this is an option that we can specify within the YAML of our document. So within the top meta specification of the thing that we're creating, we can actually just set that to true. So by default, external links, and the Bullwinkle and Rocky links are external links. They receive no special visual adornment or navigation treatment. You can use the following options. So let's try this. Link external icon. So now the expectation, we're gonna try this first within the HTML type file because I'm guessing that that's the intended use of this. So right now, let's just take a look at here. It'll be curious to see what the image actually does. But I'm guessing we'll get a box with an arrow next to it next to here. So what was the command? I forgot. I should have copied it. Link external icon. Now there's an autocomplete within RStudio that's fairly helpful. So I'm going to just type link. And sometimes you can find new functionality by using the autocomplete. There's more there than I'm typically aware of. And so one of the thoughts I had, I don't know, a week or so ago was, as I'm trying to find topics to cover on these weekly sessions, I could just let autocomplete kind of take me someplace that I wasn't aware existed. But link external icon, it gives me the possible values there as well. I'm going to accept true, and now we're expecting our links to have some more visual cue specified next to them. And that was pretty quick. I really don't like that. I mean, I maybe something like a screen reader might benefit from that. Now, it is also picking up on the images. If you look, it's very small, but centered vertically here on my image, there is a hyperlink icon as well. You can click on that, or you can click on the image, and they'll take you to that hyperlink. Okay, interesting. So that's something. I don't think I'm going to incorporate that on my slides. It's just that looks to me like it's a little intrusive, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm going to set that to false, so we'll get rid of that and take a look at some of these other kind of out of the box specifications that we can have. External window. Now this is something that I have used, not necessarily with hyperlinks, but with I guess hyperlinks. So I've used these in iframes. So when I link to not just a web page or an image, but to an entire different file, I like to control whether that happens within your current browsing window or whether a separate tab opens up, because a separate tab to me is less intrusive and less disruptive to what you're currently doing. So that's an option. Now I'm not sure what the default is on that. So it looks to me like a separate tab is opening up by default here, right? So maybe that might be the default specification. Oh no, there it goes. So actually, when I go to my browser itself, it is opening up within the same window. And again, if you want to limit the disruption of that, we can add that link external new window. Again, I'm gonna try to see if we can use the autocomplete. Man, look at all the link stuff we can do there. Link external new window. Take true, and we'll see if our navigation is a little smoother. So now if I hit that, interesting, I'm getting the image that I'm getting there that's showing up. I'm curious why that's happening. That's from a different project, and I'm not sure why there's bleed over there with those two. But yeah, the separate window works great, and so I should be able to hit just all of these different hyperlinks, and a different tab will open up each time. That's a very easy way to control kind of the user experience in your document. Let's see what happens in a PDF. I don't know that these YAML specifications are intended to be functional within a PDF. Yeah, and that's not surprising. So it looks like no. So we're not. If we wanted a visual cue in the PDF, we would have to actually do a little more investigation and take a different route. Now the external window, that's something that I think happens by default in. Oh no, it doesn't. Okay. So the external window, that is something that we could probably spend a little bit of time on, and maybe we're already 5 minutes over. I think what I'll do maybe for next week's recap is I will take a look at a way to get an external window to be operative within a PDF document as well. So that is something that people might find helpful. So I think we will actually do that. The other thing that I wanted to get to tonight, but we just kind of ran out of time. And again, that's my fault because I don't know why, but I was really worried tonight. The other thing that I thought would be neat would be, there's something kind of different down here that I saw. Code links and other links. So these are functions. This is information that will be rendered within the margin content of your HTML documents. Now, this is specific to HTML documents, but we can have sections here, and this would be helpful in something like a report to actually fully link to different types of resources. This could be codes. So, I mean, this could be code books. This could be actual other sites. So, for example, let's just try this other links specification. So again, we're getting kind of a little more elaborate here. So we're going to want to pay attention to the indentation. And so this is a subcommand within the HTML type. I'm surprised that these two aren't actually. But they worked fine as first level specifications. So the format HTML, what we want to do here is I'm interested in this other links. And then I'm going to pay attention to the indentation as well, because that's really kind of, it's really important. It's really important with this further level of specification and control that you have over these rendered documents. So the first thing I had was dash text, and then I had a dash, was it URL? I forget. href. Oh, and there's not a dash. Okay. So dash text, what we want it to display like, and then the actual link, which is an href. And so we'll do our own. We'll say this is Bullwinkle. And I'm already getting some X's. I don't like that. What should we link to? Let's see if there's a Bullwinkle fan club. If there is, the address should be, that's Facebook. I don't want to do that. I'm not sure. I have a Facebook. I haven't been on it forever. I think this is actually broadcast to Facebook, but I don't really use it. And I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of paranoid about linking up to it or seeing it, because there's probably like stuff I have to attend to and respond to. Okay, so now the expectation here with this other links specification is on our HTML file. Now we're going to get in the column margin, we're going to get something like a table of contents. Well, I've never tried this. We'll see if it works. Yeah, there it is. So it's in an other links category. It says this is Bullwinkle, and if you link to it, okay. So this is something that I think is fairly new, or it's a capability that I wasn't aware of previously. I can see again this being very useful for something like a report. So if you have a standard report, and if as I scroll, you can see that that stays static, so it stays available there, constant within the upper right-hand portion of my page. You could have a link to supplementary information for the report. You could have a link to other reports. So that's a neat way to incorporate hyperlinks. You can see by default it's giving you this link icon here. And again, there's different kinds of looks that you can have. There's a category of code links as well as this category of just kind of other. And we can probably override the specification, the labeling of that itself. Ooh, we could do an icon as well. Let's try that. There's not an example here of that, but let's try an icon. Apple. We'll try Apple. Now, this is probably going to blow up in our faces because there's different ways to specify this. We'll see if this works. We'll see if it can take that straight from the Bootstrap library. We might need double quotes. We might need further Bootstrap specification, or it might just work. Look at that. That looks great. So instead of that link chain, we could override it with one of those Bootstrap images. Honestly, is just kind of fiddling around. That was really easy and intuitive. Alarm. Look at it. Now, historically, not all of these Bootstrap images have rendered flawlessly, seamlessly here on these products. I think that's because some of them, I'm not sure, but I know that some of them are free and others are kind of more on a premium tier. But that is really slick, actually. I can see myself using that. I'm curious now if there's something that might be more report-like that we could put in there, but you can go and look at those icons yourself if you're interested. Maybe let's just quickly, let's see. You know, I don't use this that often, so I'm not sure how to actually search. I don't see a great search option here. Oh, here it is. So look for documents. I guess this is kind of like a PDF symbol. Oh, here's one. Now this one probably isn't going to work because it's a little more complex in terms of the name of this icon itself, but we'll try it. File earmark music. I'm guessing this is not going to work. Again, not all of these icons that you see on these libraries are gonna port over exactly. That one did. Don't listen to me. I guess I don't know what I'm talking about. Now they did have a PDF one. Again, this is the kind of stuff I get a little too geeked up about. So the PDF one might actually be a little more relevant for the way that people would probably use something like this. Yeah, and there it is. I don't know. That's slick. I could see myself using that. I'm glad we saw this. Again, this is a new function, a new capability that I wasn't really familiar with in terms of organization and structure of how these hyperlinks are displayed. And I really do like this. If there's a lot of supplementary, additional auxiliary information that you want to people to have access to, this is a great way to actually do it to me. Okay. So hyperlinks, there we go. We got to discover hyperlinks. So next week, unless I hear from someone with a request, we're on to the letter I. So be on the lookout for some topic relevant for single platform project execution that starts with the letter I. All right, good night. Have a good week.